So, over the last 3 months, I attended a large number of medical health camps in villages all over Karnataka. And over there, I got to see hundreds of patients on a daily basis. And something that struck me was there were so many people who were living in pain for many, many years. Now, pain is very subjective, but we as medical workers try really hard to define it. Pain has an onset, location, duration, character, radiation, but whatever it may be, it's always unpleasant. Now, I understand that most of these people didn't have access to good medical care, but what was very interesting was their outlook. They had somehow rationalized their physical pain. They normalized it. They didn't see it as something that needed to be dealt with, and as uncomfortable as it was, they lived with it. Now, if there are so many people who are just living and suffering with pain, something that can still somewhat be defined, imagine the number of people doing the same with mental illness. Many of these people haven't even identified the problem, and therefore they don't know that they have to do something about it. And I was definitely one of these people. I struggled with depression for 7 months before even realizing that something was wrong. Now, I promise I'm not going to get into a long and tiring description of my depression, but what I want you to know about me is that I had a very, very sheltered childhood. I spent 12 years in this school where I loved everyone and everyone loved me, I assume. And I got so comfortable in this little bubble that I had created for myself, just filled with happiness, fun, and no negativity. Very naive, I know. So you can imagine once my school life finally came to an end, I didn't handle things gracefully. Instead of embracing change, I resisted it. Instead of just going with the flow, I tried to control every single thing in my life, from the way that I looked, to the way I behaved, to the way people perceived me. And as you can imagine, when you try to control so many things, you're bound to be disappointed. And I was disappointed, continuously. Now, I understand that sadness is a very important emotion. It's a core emotion. Everyone is supposed to feel sadness at some point in their lives, but it is supposed to be a transient and fleeting feeling. But after 7 months, I realized that I couldn't remember the last time that I was happy. So finally, I decided to talk about it. I invited 2 of my closest friends to my favorite restaurant. And as they sat in front of me, I just wanted to tell them exactly what was happening and exactly what I was feeling. But when I tried to, I noticed that I had developed a stutter. Now, as someone who loves speaking and singing and performing on stage, this newly developed acute stutter was very confusing and surprising. But before I could think too much about that, I suddenly lost the ability to speak. The neck muscles on the right side of my body tightened, my mouth began to froth, and my entire body was thrown into convulsions. Now, most people can imagine what a seizure looks like, but something that you should know is that while many seizures render a patient unconscious, the one that I had allowed me to retain all of my senses. So I remember everything that I saw, I remember everything I heard, and I remember how everything felt. And honestly, so you can empathize a little bit, it felt like watching a scary movie, a really scary movie through your eyes. What's strange is that even in that moment, mid-seizure, I was trying to take control of that situation. I wanted to tell my friends exactly what is happening, exactly what they should do. I wanted to tell one of them to put me on my side and the other to call my parents. But soon all words turned into meaningless sounds, and I had to very quickly give up trying to speak. At one point, a kind waiter from the restaurant came to me and he was holding my head and he said, "Do you understand me? Can you hear me?" And I thought in that moment, let me just blink at him. Let me just give him a strong blink so he knows, yes, I understand you. But even though my mind had made the decision to blink, my eyes wouldn't close. I had lost the ability to blink. I had lost control over something that I do countless times a day, something that I don't think about at all, but in that moment I was thinking about it, and I couldn't do it. So after a quick ride to the emergency room and even quicker CT scan, I remember the doctor diagnosing me with a post-traumatic subdural hematoma. Now, I assume that most of you don't know what that is. So a subdural hematoma, or an SDH, is a collection of blood in the space between the skull and the brain. I wasn't sure when it happened, but apparently I had hit my head sometime in the last 2 to 6 months, and I was very, very gradually bleeding into my skull. The blood had shifted my entire brain by 3 millimeters to the right and had compressed one area by more than a centimeter. Now, I should also mention that the depression and the brain bleed were completely unrelated. They were independent things that were just happening simultaneously. Soon I was booked for surgery, and you'd think that the seizure was the most traumatic part of this entire experience, and I did too. I was so wrong, because everything that followed was just as hard, if not harder. I won't go into the gory details, but I will tell you that the original surgery that was planned had to be changed midway because there was just so much of a collection that they needed to do a much more extensive surgery. After that, I spent 2 lonely and difficult nights in the neuro ICU, where I was the only person who was conscious. I was only 19-year-old at that time, and next to me was a man in psychosis. He was continuously pulling out all his tubes and screaming that he needs to get to his meeting. There was a woman in the ICU who had amnesia, and she didn't recognize or remember her children that kept coming to visit her. And then opposite me was a man whose arms and legs were in restraints, and I really don't want to know why. Once I was shifted to my hospital room, the post-op pain, fever, and swelling were unrelenting and honestly too difficult to describe. And honestly, the depression wave just became much, much stronger at that time. However, one of the hardest side effects was something called the Jacksonian seizure. It's very correctly also known as the marching seizure because it is a seizure that marches across your body. It would start in my right hand, and for 10 minutes I would feel a tingling sensation. And if I touched any cool surface, even a glass of water, it felt ice cold. If I touched something that was even slightly warm, even my mom's hand, it would feel burning hot. Soon the seizure would march up to my tongue, and I was not able to speak for the next 10 to 15 minutes. The most I could do was sound out a few consonants, but no words. And because of this, I soon stopped asking people to visit me because it was too hard to listen to people asking me if I was fine, and I wasn't able to tell them that I am fine, because honestly, I really wasn't fine. Like this, the seizure would march from my right hand to my tongue, down to my leg, back to my mouth, and back to my hand. 30 minutes long, 5 times a day for the next 2 weeks. An unfortunate detail that I didn't mention was that my surgery and seizure were exactly 30 days before my first year final MBBS exams. There was a point of time in my life that those exams were the most important thing to me, and they used to cause me so much stress. And if I wanted to stay in my batch and not have to wait an entire year, I really needed to pass those exams. So I had 1 month to not only finish my syllabus, but also get used to all the side effects and regain function of my right hand. Another thing which may not seem too important to you, but was very important to me and difficult, was I had gained 15 kilograms in that 1 month and did not fit into a single one of my clothes. I had to wear my father's clothes to my exams. And honestly, as someone who was pretty vain at that time, it was a real kick when I was down. When I had joined college, back before the seizure, the surgery, and all of the struggle, if you had asked me, what do you want in this year? I would have just said, I'm a huge nerd. I would have said, I want to do well in my exams. I want to pass with a distinction. Now, in medical college, getting a distinction is quite hard. Only 3 to 5% of students do it every year. But I knew it was hard, and it was something that I really wanted back then. By the time the exams had actually finished, it had been 10 months of this entire experience. 7 months of depression, the seizure, the surgery, the recovery, the exams, practicals. 10 months of struggle. And in 10 months, I had gone from being someone who wanted to control every single thing in his life to someone who just accepted that absolutely nothing was in my control. So finally, when the results did come out, I passed. And thank you. And I also passed with a distinction. Now, in that moment, I was briefly very, very confused. I had to read the results 3 times, make sure I was reading my result, and after a few minutes, when I realized that this was real, I just thought, thank you. For the first time, I felt a very specific feeling, a very specific emotion quite clearly, and I realized that that was gratitude. In 10 months, the situation was entirely out of my control. Nothing went the way I planned it. But at the end, it was perfect, and I was just grateful. Now, I've been reading a lot about gratitude, and as simple or silly as it may sound, there have been many scientific studies that have proven that gratitude has been linked to lower levels of cortisol, the stress hormone, and therefore it can reduce fear and anxiety. Gratitude has been proven to enhance both dopamine and serotonin, the neurotransmitters responsible for happiness. Practicing gratitude on a daily basis has been linked to better sleep, improved immunity, increased pain tolerance, decreasing high blood pressure, improving blood sugar, and honestly just leading a healthier and happier lifestyle. So I try very hard to practice gratitude. Now, even if it's a very, very busy day, I try to take half a minute maybe. It could be while I'm waiting for the red light to turn green, while I'm heating up food in the microwave, or if I'm just finishing my morning coffee. I just need to stop for a second and think about every wonderful thing in my life and just say thank you. And honestly, I encourage every one of you to do the same. Whether you're saying thank you to God or the universe or to someone in your life or just to yourself, just stop, find one thing, and just whisper a soft thank you. When I look back at that very dark and depressing time, I realize I'm actually super grateful because I had exceptional medical care, and a huge shout out to my neurosurgery team and every nurse who took care of me. I'm grateful for how even though during the Jacksonian seizures I couldn't speak, no words at all, but by some miracle I could still sing. And honestly, that was to the amazement of my doctors, my parents, and honestly me. I was doing it and I had no idea how. But I would keep singing the first 2 lines of Frank Sinatra's Fly Me to the Moon over and over again for 30 minutes, and that was the only way I got through that. But most importantly, I'm grateful for the people who were with me. My dad, mom, and sister did everything in their power to make a very, very difficult situation easier for me. They were strong and they handled every single thing. The 2 friends who were with me that day, I am eternally grateful for them because when I couldn't take control of a situation, they stepped up and they did. And they took control of a very, very unexpected situation in the most brilliant way possible. All the people who wanted to meet me, all the people who asked me how I was doing, how I was feeling, people who send me texts, send me chocolate, send me music, I'm grateful for all of them. At a moment in time when I thought that I was completely alone in the world, I actually had an army behind me. And it's because of them that I could actually fight. And at the end of it all, I'm left with this battle scar. And honestly, I love it because not only do I really think it's cool, I don't know if you agree with me or not, but I love it. But I also love the fact that every time someone asks me about it, I can tell them my story. That's this story. Thank you. After practicing letting go of control and embracing gratitude, I'm honestly happier. I'm grateful for the depression because it's allowed me to connect with others who've gone through the same thing, and it's allowed me to help them. I'm grateful for the fact that the medication that I was given after my surgery, which I continue to take this day, gives me anxiety. And yes, I still struggle with anxiety, and honestly, it's really hard. For those of you who know what that's like, you get it. But I'm grateful for the anxiety because it's allowed me to help others. It's allowed me to somehow find a way to overcome it and share that with others. Honestly, it's the gratitude that has helped me get over the depression and the anxiety. Honestly, I'm grateful for the entire thing, the seizure, the surgery, because honestly, it's changed me fundamentally, and I'm here because of both of those things. And now, honestly, after practicing gratitude for 4 years, it's actually much easier. I'm honestly grateful for everything. I'm grateful for the way my cat blinked at me in the morning because she's so cute. I'm grateful for the fact that this room is air-conditioned because I naturally feel really hot all the time. I'm grateful for the fact that there wasn't too much traffic today, and I actually got a really good parking spot, and I keep thinking about that. I'm so happy. So, honestly, I hope you guys can do the same thing. I'm honestly grateful for everything. And one last thing, which is honestly specific to just me, is that on any day at any given time, I can be grateful for the fact that when my mind decides to blink, my eyes will close. Thank you.